Hi guys. So this week I was working on a new project, and I thought I'd share it with you. I was just basically just looking on the LinkedIn. I saw another post about some guy who was unemployed for about 9 months. He had his CVs getting ignored by recruiters, and he was a software engineer. And he built this. He built. He's basically built his own company that allowed you to puts tracking inside your PDF CV PDFs, so you can actually see when the recruiters are actually opening your PDFs and so forth. You can do some analytics, trying to figure out how people are viewing your application and so forth. So I did a bit of research on this, and I tried to see what was possible. And basically, after a lot of research, probably about 4 days, I used a lot of AI to help with a lot of the subject matter. But even though it was not in an area of my speciality and my skill set, I was able to easily build it within about 4 days. So it didn't really take me that long to get my head around things. It was just like I'd never heard of this thing called Netlify, which is what I built it to work with. And there's a few other things I never heard of, like XFDF and things like that. And these are all topics I had to learn to be able to basically do all this tracking. But with the use of AI, and not only is AI really good at helping you write code, it's actually really good at learning. It really can get you straight to the point and give you the answers that you need to understand to be able to build things if you ask the right questions. So this is AI is massively accelerating my development massively, than what I've ever had in the past. Like, I mean, I can still do this myself, but AI basically allows me to do it within a couple of days and get me the knowledge that I needed to be able to build this stuff essentially on my own, and not have to be so much of an expert, because like I think that once you've been a developer, you have that sort of mindset of thinking, and I think that once you've been a developer, it doesn't really take that long to go across other different sort of tech stacks and become comfortable in them and so forth, and then get your head around sort of concepts and architectural concepts and so forth. Especially now, AI is very much accelerating a lot of this learning process. So, for example, I built a project that allows you to, and I'm giving it for free. I'm basically allowing this public free. It allows you to basically see when recruiters will open up. It can be used in any PDF, but you can use it on your CV if you want as a PDF. If it's a PDF, and it'll provide it'll provide invisible tracking in the PDF, and it'll track every time someone opens it. And you can do that completely. You can do that in Acrobat Reader. It'll work with Acrobat Reader. It doesn't work in the browser because in the browser we have it runs in a sandboxed environment. And what I didn't actually realize about PDFs is they can actually embed a small bit of JavaScript in them, and this JavaScript will execute on startup inside Acrobat Reader. It's on by default unless you turn it off. And in that JavaScript, you can make it like fetch like a URL or something like that, which could be like a tracking link URL. And if someone's connected to the internet at the time, then you can basically keep a tabs of how many people are opening and when they're opening if you've got some sort of back end system to keep track of it. So I did a bit of research, and what I wanted to do was to build sort of like a business idea that was dirt cheap to operate, but at the same time has some gains in getting money. So what I was looking at is something where I could basically have like sort of like free hosting, because I knew I'd have to have like a back end system for this. I need somewhere to store these tracking links, right? I can't just have it all client sided. So I need something that's free or cheap, to be able to bootstrap like a business or something like that if you wanted to. And just a disclaimer, this isn't a business; it's free. It's something free I'm doing at the moment. But it's just really like a testing the waters in the market right now to see, if, because I think this is the way if developers are to build their own thing and they go their own way. If they can't get employed and they go their own thing, this is the way to do it, is to try and build business ideas that are dirt cheap and cost to operate, but have potentially at least can earn you some money, but they have minimal expenses to be able to start off. While you're trying to get your audience and notice and so forth, right? So that you don't have to incur costs and things and so forth. You've got, and as people discover you, you can start building that up with more with business ideas where the expenses are, and then then basically then you can go into more expensive like sort of expenses and so forth with revenue producing ideas. So is essentially the way this works. I'll just I'll give it a bit of a demo first. So I'll just get into the application, and the first thing we need to do is we need to go into the web app folder in the project. It's the GitHub's repo has been supplied, and you go into the web app, and then after you've set this all up, you run npm run dev. This will start a web server with the React web application. And essentially, we're not going to use this. We have to have it running because it has to do some redirects. We have to actually have two servers that are actually running here for this project to actually work. So the first bit is a React website. And this is sort of like the front end. This is a management sort of application that allows you to view all the trackings and create the tracking links and so forth. And this is all built in React TypeScript, Tailwind. And then we have sort of like a back-end server, which is using serverless functions, Netlify serverless functions, right, in the backend. And this will, when you pull up what we can do is we can pull up a dev serverless server, so we don't have to consume, when we're testing this, we don't have to consume backend processing costs and so forth. We deploy it onto a server. We can run it locally with npm run dev, and it'll run a local serverless dev server. And what that'll do is it'll actually redirect all the requests. It'll actually pick up the front end, which is hosted here on the local host, this thing here, and it'll actually serve it with all the back end stuff as well. So we just need to run the front end first, and this runs it on port 5173. And then what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go into the root directory, which is watch CV, and I'm going to do what I do is I actually build it first. So it's got the latest copy. So I do Netlify build. This Netlify command, you have to actually download. It's a program. It's a CLI from Netlify. Netlify is like a website that allows you to host serverless functions and so forth. And it's got cost is also a free model for like small projects and so forth, which I'm using for my project. So this might take a little bit of time to build. It's going to show credentials, so I'm just going to actually have to hide this. I'm just going to hide this because it's going to actually show some credentials of my database, and I don't want to see that. So when this is complete, I'm just going to run a CLS. It's not going to be visible on the screen, the actual backend database settings, because it actually will show you on this. So so we'll just do that. Taking a little bit of time to build it. Just bear with my time. All right, so what I'm going to do is CLS clear this. All right, let's clear the screen. And then what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to actually show you this one too, because I have a feeling it shows it here. npm run dev. I'm not going to show you the result of this. It will open up a new browser window when it's ready. So I don't want people to see my database settings. So I'm just hiding at the moment. But what will happen is eventually the website will open in the browser. So I've got a browser window waiting here, and it's going to pop up soon after it's launched. It just takes just give it about a minute or so, 30 seconds, a minute, and it'll launch. So it should do it very soon. There we go. You can see it's launched port 8888, which is the port for this serverless, the whole thing. So this is the app here. It's called Watch CV, and I'm just going to clear some of the current tracking that's there. These are current trackings that I'm doing. They're just testing, and you've got on this website you've got a few things. You've got like up the top left-hand corner where you can enter your CV, and essentially you'll get given a prompt to actually choose the file and everything that you want to track, and then you can also basically generate a tracking link. And in the tracking link, you can put any URL here, and you click generate, and what it'll do is it'll generate a URL that essentially, and if you get that URL out, what it does is it hits the web server, and then it records that against that tracking ID that it's been accessed, and then it sends a redirect to the real URL. And then down here you can see everything you set up. This area down here, it's all set up in your cookies. It's not saved on a server or anything like that. Saved in your cookies. So once you clear it, it's gone. No one knows about. Even I can't recover it unless I know unless you tell me what your tracking ID is. But it's not something that it's stored locally. I keep track of it locally, even though the tracking IDs are stored on the server. So the first thing I'm going to do is demonstrate your tractor CV. I'm just going to pause the video here because I don't want people seeing all my file system and everything like that, and I'll just get it to point to a PDF file. And I'm just going to open it up. What I'm going to do is select the file. So I've just clicked on that link there, and this brings like a little dial-up box where I can select my PDF file. And I'm going to select this one here, which is my current PDF at the moment for my CV. So what you do is you just double click on this, and you can see there, and it opens it up in Acrobat at the moment. But I'm just going to, it's already done everything. It won't anyone hit, but I'm just going to show you. You can see here, once I selected it, essentially it added it down here now, and it says done, created this file, creates this other file called trucked, which basically comes in my downloads folder. Essentially now, if I press F5, I've got two files here now. I don't have just Chris CV, I've got this CV tracked. And this tracked one is basically a modification of this one, but it has tracking inside of it, right? And so if you go back into the application and you have a look, and you refresh the page and so forth, and I clicked on this, you can see the total opens now as 1, right? And you can say, maybe you just made it do that, right? Okay, but that's not the case. I'm gonna prove it. So you've got like 1647, right? And you can potentially see my time at the bottom, 4:48 p.m. This is 4:47 p.m., right? So if we open this up again in Acrobat, there'll be another event that'll be added here, and this will increment up to 2. And there'll be the time that I opened it up in. So if I go back into Acrobat and then I shut this down, and then I try and reopen it again in Acrobat. So I'm going to double click on it and open it. It might open up in Chrome. We'll just see in a second. So remember, I'm going to just see the time first of all. Like it's 4:48. I'm going to work rate to 4:49. Maybe that might be best to see that it works. And you'll see that it will pop up in the application. 4:48. I don't want to have to wait. There we go. 4:49. There we go. So I'm just going to see. It might open this up in Chrome. Okay, it opened up in Chrome, but that's all right. So if we go, I'm going to show this to you. So if I go into the application and I just press refresh again, you can see with Chrome, it doesn't actually do anything. It doesn't work with Chrome. I admit that. But it does work with Acrobat. If you look at this again, if we go back to I think we can edit with Acrobat up here, the button at the top, it's going to open this up with Acrobat. Not now. Okay, I've got to, looks like I've got to open this directly. Hold on a second. So what I can do is I can go open with Acrobat. And I'm going to open this up directly with Acrobat. I'm going to show you. So 4:49 at the bottom. Okay, now it opens up. Oh, it's actually probably 4:50 because it actually just changed the time now. So we'll have a look. Ask me later. Yeah, it's going to be 4:50 as the time. So now if I go back into the application and I refresh this, see now it's got 2 views. And you can see here, that's the newest one there. Just to see it at 2 seconds past when it changed onto 50, it's now opened it up. So now, basically, every time that someone opens this up, this as long as this web page is hosting, it will show up here when you click here, and it'll give you back to this is going to show like a graph that will show you the amount of times it's open per day. So I can basically, as long as someone uses Acrobat, I can track when they're opening or not. Yeah, so essentially, this was a business idea that someone had produced. We copied it within 4 days, essentially. um, and yeah, so there you go. Right, I'm going to just show you the whole full code review of how it actually works. Um, so you've got essentially there's a folder called Netlify, and these basically have your serverless routines. And essentially, these are like util classes that are used by the service routines. You've got create tracking, and this basically initially creates like the tracking link. So what you've got is the first thing when it does it, it's checking like this is basically a serverless endpoint. So it's a handle of a HTTP request. It only gets fired off. It only executes when the HTTP request actually occurs. It doesn't run. You don't have a server running all the time. That's the advantage of using serverless, right? So you've got, for example, the first thing it does is it connects to the database. And with this away, you might think, wouldn't this be bad? It's trying to connect every time. It doesn't connect every time. Because if you have a look at the code inside here, you can see at the top, we have a cache. And if it's already initialized once, it will reuse the cached version. Otherwise, it'll open the connection. This is so, because what we don't want it opening 9 million connections every time everyone hits the URL, right? You don't want thousands of DB connections happening, right? So we use like MongoDB as a database. But essentially, like if it's already open, then just use the connection that exists. Otherwise, open a new one and cache it. So that's essentially the logic there. And then you get the DB, and then we have like certain collections. These are like tables, basically tracking ID, which has all the different trackings. And then we get a couple of settings from an environment. I'm not going to open it because it has sensitive settings in there. Of all the like configurations, like we have like, for example, the IP range cooldown minutes. Essentially, like what we do is because this is free and I'm trying to prevent people from spamming my service. I don't want people creating thousands of trackings, but that's basically what I'm trying to say. Is I have a way to ensure that only a certain amount per in the IP range gets created in a time period. And then there's a maximum per hour. This is across the board, right? So there's one per in the IP range, and then there's one. So we have like you can only create one tracking per hour in the IP range in the ISP. Then I have, let's say, like a certain amount in total that can be created per hour. So I might say, I allow 100 to be created across anyone that wants to create one. As long as no one else in your IP range is created, you can create it as long as you're also still under the 100 per hour. I also get the client IP address. This is to do with, so I know for things like this, whether your IP IP has previously used it in the range. So I have to get your IP address from the request. And I check the IP range. I look at the time now. I basically work out when it's cooled down, and then I try and see if there's another entry there already. Because if there is another entry there with your IP address in your range, right, I'm not going to let you create a new entry. Because there's too many people creating it, so it's potentially could be a spam attack or something like that, right? And then I will return like a status code and error, JSON response error saying it was already created. Otherwise, I'm going to check the global limit next and see how many have been created in the global limit. And if it's all good like that, I create a new tracking. And the new tracking, basically, I use a UUID as the tracking number. That's so that it's reasonably unique. I mean, UUIDs, you can have collisions, but it's pretty rare. But essentially, what will happen is if you create like a UUID, you can't guess someone else's ID because I don't want people guessing other people's IDs, right? Like you want to make sure that you're only getting tracking for yourself. So the way I ensure that no one knows what your tracking ID is we create like a UUID because it's hard to crack someone else's, So we do that and we get the tracking ID, unique ID. The IP address, we figure out your range, your IP. That just makes it easy for the DB lookup next time to figure out if the IP range is in it. When it's created, last updated is a feature. I'll explain what the purpose of that field is. It's not really used yet. But basically what happens is when you create like a new tracking, you'll have the date that it was created, which is this field here. And the last updated is basically, actually it is used. I'm getting confused here. It's something else that's not used. But this one actually is used. And every time basically you have a new tracking that's generated from that tracking ID, this will update. And the reason why this is basically to allow database searches to be more efficient, because it's easy to know when, because what I do is I have something called a stale, which is this file here. And if your tracking hasn't been touched in 4 weeks, I want to know about it. So this last updated is a very easy way for me to know from a very efficient database point of view whether your tracking has been touched or not. Like every time your tracking has been touched, this will get updated. So all I got to do is just search for entries where the last updated is older than four weeks from now. And anything that is, then you've got a tracking that's not really been used anymore, and I can remove it. So that's essentially it's a fast way I can look it up in the DB. Instead of going through thousands of records, I just know from this one record whether you're using it or not. And then if it's all good, I insert. Insert the record, and and so your tracking is created. Then that's creating the tracking. Then there's obviously actually causing the tracking to occur. So to cause the tracking to occur, I have something called ad tracking. And ad tracking, this is kind of a bit complicated. I've got some console logging. I should actually remove that. That's in Git too. So I don't want any console loggings in my code. I'll get rid of that today. You'll probably see a commit for that. So anyway, it's like what we have here is we have something called an FTF structure. And what happens is when Acrobat makes a form, it's basically a form request. It basically uses a method called submit form. I'm going to show you in a sec what this looks like on the PDF. But it calls this thing called submit form, and it has a URL in it. And it expects that the backend responds with this FTF format. And this was absolutely hell trying to get this to work for about 3 days, because Acrobat kept getting errors and it wouldn't tell us what was wrong. We had to go through so much references on the internet to figure it out. And we finally figured it out. So you've got to, for the FTF, you've got to basically, this tells you, it's kind of like a response that explains how the forms have been updated. So, and it tells what to do after the forms update. Like you do want to display like a success message or something like that in Acrobat or not. We don't want to display anything. We just want it to be silent, right? But we need it to stop complaining. So this is an empty one. And essentially it just says, everything's all good. Don't worry about anything. Don't display any message. Everything's all good. And just mark it as okay. And that's exactly what it does. And then we got, like, for example, after everything's all right, that they have to provide a tracking ID in the request. And if, as long as the request is correct and everything like that, we actually ensure that the tracking ID exists inside the database that you've supplied. Everything is supplied with a 200 status code. This is on purpose, because what happens is when you get to this point, it's been hit by Acrobat, and we want it to be successful, because if you tell it that it failed, it actually displays an error message inside Acrobat. We want it to fail silently on Acrobat, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So we tell it everything's all good, even though it wasn't really all good. It didn't find the tracking ID or something like that. Like maybe it was a stale tracking ID or something like that was removed or something like that, right? So we don't disrupt your PDF from being opened if something, it does if basically there was an error on the server. So, it checks, there's also this cool off time. So basically we'll only record updates, with maybe like a minute in between each other. If you because we don't want someone spamming this, because every time it tracks, it actually records an entry of the time, right? You saw in that table, it said that like the times, it said, like 4:50 and something like 4:50 and 4:48, right? 4:50, 47 or whatever. And essentially, we don't want, every time it does that, it creates like a database entry. So we don't want someone going spam, 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 and creating a huge amounts of database rows. So we have like a cooldown second of about a minute, So this is adjustable too, to what we feel is safe. So it's the strikes the balance between, we don't care about minute accesses, we care about minutes in between, but you can't actually spam our service. So these things have been sorted. You can't give us a denial of service attack by flooding our database with thousands of entries, basically. So this is designed so you can't flood the database. So if you spam it with, you keep opening closing your PDF, or you just spam the tracking your 9 million times, it's only going to record it like once every minute, and that's on purpose. So if that's all good, then we create another entry. It's actually in another collection that has the individual tracking event itself. So you've got the tracking ID, the original one is right, and then you've got like an event ID, which also has a unique ID, guild ID, which can be managed. And we have like the IP address that particular access was accessed by. We have created at, and we have last updated at. Essentially, so this is what I was getting confused about before. So the created at is when it was created. Then you have like a last updated at. And the purpose behind, at the moment, is just going to be the same. But what we were going to do is essentially we were going to make it so that when you create it, you can, for example, you can poll it. So this hasn't been implemented, but it was the idea of like what would happen is if you wanted to track, let's say, how long a recruiter kept your PDF open for, you need to have some sort of polling. So you need to say, okay, when the PDF is open, I'm going to every 10 seconds or so, every 20 seconds or so, I'm going to hit a URL to keep telling that this PDF is still open and open. So the latest time frame how long they roughly kept it open for. And essentially what this last updated would be the last time that hit. And the created would be like when it first was created. So from the difference between the two, you can work out the time that your PDF was open for. So this isn't used, and I don't do any polling because it's going to require spamming URLs constantly and so forth. Maybe we can do WebSockets. I don't know. That's another interesting to see if we can do something like that. That would be ideal for poll instead of polling. But I'll have to do some research into that. And then you've got if it's all good, then we'll add the tracking in, and we'll set it, create the new event. Anyway, so there's a few other APIs here. Get tracking, it gets the information about a single tracking, like how many events you've done per the tracking. We give you back an array. Based on the tracking ID, we've got something called redirect, and this is for the redirect link. What happens is you hit this URL, and as part of the URL, you've got the URL portion, which is like this thing. It's checking the parameters exist, and then you've got like the tracking ID. With those two things together, with the tracking ID, you store increment 1 for the tracking ID or create a new event, and then you redirect to the URL that's given. That's essentially all it does. It stores in the database. We still have the cooldown to make sure you're not abusing it once again. And if that's all good, then we'll record it, but we'll redirect you anyway, even if you don't record an event. Actually, yeah, we do. See here. So you can see here that we've got the thing called too soon. I just had to double check it was doing that. We have too soon. If it's too soon, we'll store the entry, but we'll always redirect anyway at the end. Still redirect even if DB write fails. Remove stale trackings. Essentially, we'll look for old entries. It looks at the environment variable. Essentially, works out anything that's by the last updated at. And if it's too old, then it'll get rid of it and it'll delete all the events as well, the tracking events as well as the tracking IDs and so forth. And then there's an update tracking as well too. I'm not using that at the moment. This is for like the polling. This was kind of the functionality for using the polling, and yeah, it'll update a single event. It won't create any new events. It'll just update the last update basically on a single event if it exists. And the tracking ID exists. Yeah. So that's the back end functions to build it. And then we've also got the MongoDB. We've got a script here that basically sets up the MongoDB, sets all your collections up initially. You run this on startup of the project, and it'll create everything you need. And then we've got the React application. I can just go into this briefly and just show you how it is. It's all built with Tailwind. I'm using Vite as well, TypeScript. I'm using Jest as well. So you've got your standard index of the HTML, and you've got like all the core components like your app.txs and setup tests. And then you've got APIs sort of like handlers to the actual API. I could also wrap this in something like React Query or something like that. I think probably that actually might be a good idea for this is improvements for get tracking actually. I think that would work well for get tracking, putting in something like React Query or something like that, because if you just keep clicking on it and so forth, you don't want to just keep pressing it, because it's probably unlikely if someone's, you're only going to have tracking updating few times every day, right? So it's probably, probably good to actually put like wrap this on with something like React Query to put some caching or so forth on the tracking ID and the responses. So I guess that's, possibly, I think, room for improvement I've noticed already and a bit of the code review. And then you've got components. I've got my individual components on this. This is just one way I like to split things up. This is one way I kind of like it, because putting actual folder inside the components. So I've got the header. This one needs a test. That one doesn't need a test. But all the other ones have tests in them. So this one, and this is exactly the reason why I like to structure it this way, because it allows me to see if there's like a missing test for a component. So I put my components in there. So I've got like the PDF injector, which is the component at the top left-hand corner. And then there's like, just tests for this that actually test it, and so forth. And then, we've got like the tracking detail, which essentially is essentially the actual main panel on the right-hand side that actually shows you all the the total opens created last seen, that the box you saw on the right-hand side of the page, and opens per day, and it uses the thing called views chart, which gives you a chart, which is using recharts as the library to draw it. Tracking link, which handles like the tracking link component, it gives you a tracking link. We've got tracking list, which at the bottom shows you all the different things you're tracking, and then we've got view charts, which shows you essentially this is like the recharts component. I use like a responsive container, so that this probably should actually extend. I'm just thinking more responsively how I could change this actually now. But yeah, it's we use a responsive container base, so it's and then essentially the component itself is made up of, this is to use the recharts component, like line charts, and essentially I have like a tooltip and so forth. These are all different components that you can use for recharts to draw it up. And then I have a hooks folder, which is like my custom hooks. I have a use PDF trackings. I split this into its own file. I'm going to show you. Basically, what it does is it uses this method. We don't actually use this method. This was another way we could actually do the request inside the PDF, but it wasn't the best way. I had a bit of a play around, and I thought this was the better way to do it. And then I have a function that allows you to save the PDF. It builds, creates the PDF, makes it as like a download. It automatically creates as a download link and clicks it, and then the browser automatically downloads it, and so forth. That's why when you click on it, automatically downloads it. So this embed JavaScript, this is what I use. I use something called PDF document. PDF lib essentially is a library I'm using. It gives me a lot more low-level access to the PDF. And this is the tracking sheet. This is the JavaScript that it puts in. So this is executed on load. So it's simple as this.submit form. We have a URL, which is basically the tracking URL, and your tracking ID is passed as parameters. And we submit it as HTML. This is one of the ways I could only get to work. It doesn't submit your whole PDF or anything like that. It actually submits form values, but there isn't any form values on what there might be. And this is the thing, though. It comes with a disclaimer, is that it will, if there is a form on your PDF, it will try and submit it. So it works as long as there's no forms in your PDF. But it's probably going to submit your form to our URL. So I should probably give that as a bit of a disclaimer. But we don't do anything with it anyway. So if you did, there wouldn't be anything there. So essentially, and then we add the JavaScript to open, and then we save it, and then we return the bytes back, and then essentially, after we return the bytes, we save those bytes into the original file, and then that basically just saves it on the file system. Yep. And use trackings. This is essentially like some utility functions to load from the cookies, management of the tracking. So there's loading the list at the bottom right hand. It's got to load it from cookies and so forth. So it loads it from cookies, saves it, management of the trackings that you've got on the bottom left hand corner. So that's how the project works. And that works for Acrobat. It won't work for Chrome. And it's thing too is you can also create tracking links. So for example, if your PDF has links to personal projects, and you want to see how much the recruiters are actually viewing your personal projects, you can put tracking links on that and find those things out. See how many people are actually looking at your CV versus just skimming over it, to give a bit of an idea, to what's actually happening. Yeah, so this is a project that I've built in the course of about 3 days. Yeah, 3 days, 3 or 4 days. It wasn't perfect working first, even for Claude. I used Claude to. Oh, I didn't mention that. I used Claude to actually build the project, but then I did modification on that to actually make some changes. So this is the power of using AI now. If you've got an idea, you can put it to to practice pretty quickly now with all these AI systems that are coming out. And I think the bigger limitation now is what I'm saying a lot on my LinkedIn is visibility, because you can build the idea. It's getting the people to notice your idea and so forth, and willing to pay for your ideas and so forth. Your product that you're building, and that's actually the real challenge that comes out of all of this now. So so this is some of the stuff I've been doing this week. So every week I'm just playing around with new stuff, skilling up on different things, while essentially I'm looking for work. Yeah. Thank you everyone for watching. Thanks. Bye.